Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we continue our program on apology that we started yesterday with an extraordinary circle of Indigenous women elders who blessed us and literally created a container, a womb for all that we're going to contemplate and explore as we delve as deeply as we can over the next several months into the wounds that we all experience in this chaotic and increasingly turbulent world, the apologies that we need to receive, the apologies that we need to give, apologies to each other, apologies to our bodies, apologies to the earth. So we're going to have a very deep exploration on Humanity Rising that will be interwoven, as I indicated, with other salient issues, principally the war in Ukraine that has brought the world to the most dangerous moment of our lifetime because of the increasing prospect of nuclear exchange, certainly the most dangerous moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. So 2023 will be full, it will be eventful, it will be turbulent in ways that I think right now we can't really imagine. So the purpose of Humanity Rising over the unfolding months is really to bring ourselves together in as deep a way as we can in the coherence and love and compassion of our community that stretches around the world. We have people viewing from over 130 countries. We have a stalwart team each day that meets on this Zoom line. We have many partners, over 350 partners. We have live streaming partners. So we're very grateful for all of you who over the last several years have been building our community of both learning and mutual support. As we start today, before we get into our program on apology, we want to note a course that's coming up next weekend on the 21st of January on the astrology of 2023. We take very seriously that the human species is interconnected with the larger ecology on planet Earth, and also that planet Earth is an integral part of a larger ecology of our solar system, and our solar system is an integral part of the overall ecology of our galaxy, and in fact, the universe, in which every single aspect, everywhere, is connected with every single aspect anywhere. And therefore, it's our capacity to understand these interconnections that really give us the texture of what's really going on, but also a guide to how we should understand unfolding historical events and some of the attitudes and behaviors that we manifest. So I want to welcome you, and just we're going to take a few minutes with Lynn Bell, who's an astrologer of some note who lives in Paris, who will be teaching our course on astrology on the 21st of January. So Lynn, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising, and just take 5 minutes or so just to tell us a little bit about the highlights of the year and what you have in store for the course.
Hi, thank you, Tim. Well, first of all, I want to say that it's an incredible time to be doing this work on apology. One of the characteristics of 2023 is two big planets are changing signs. One is Saturn, and Saturn is going to enter the sign of Pisces, which is a sign of tears, a sign of empathy, a sign of loss, a sign of compassion. It has many meetings, but with Saturn and Pisces, it can offer an opportunity to actually release emotions from behind barriers, and so that they flow between people who are not putting up barriers to other people's suffering. And Saturn always gives us a task, but it always awakens our fears. And our fear might be that we get overwhelmed or that we become one of them, one of what we don't wish to be. So Saturn in Pisces comes with a responsibility to recognize the wounds that others are carrying, and to recognize the wounds of the earth, and in some ways to take responsibility. However, whatever that means, I think it's up to each individual to find a way to take responsibility for so much uh, devastation that's happened and is happening and continues um, in our world. And there is another very exciting planetary shift, which is Pluto um, moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. And Pluto has a 240-year cycle. So it's been over 220 years since Pluto's been in this sign. And Aquarius is a sign that empowers the collective. Uh, Pluto going into sign both brings up the power and the shadow of a sign. And this is a very long passage. But one of the things it does is favor people who are coming together with recognition of each individual in a group, with the essential dignity of the other, whether that, whatever origin, whatever gender, whatever age, to recognize something fundamental. So the power of these two signs is extraordinary, and these two sign shifts is extraordinary. And this is one of the things that I'll be talking about. But they're alike with anything. There's always a hope we can have for the best of a sign, and then a sorrow we might have when we act in another direction, because groups are also forming. The power of groups and the power of groups to disrupt the dominant discourse is something we saw at the beginning of this week in Brazil, for example, where we saw these choreographed minions bust in to desecrate and do damage to the collective endeavor of a state, its constitution, and its institutions, something we saw 2 years ago. And this is, so there are groups that may be working against this unfolding, the one we might wish for all our heart. And I'll be exploring these in detail, looking to a degree at how they affect us as individuals and how they will be moving through the collective. But in many ways, these new energies, we can feel them as a preamble, as stepping into something. We know that it's there. So it's not surprising that here at Ubiquity, they're doing this course on apology. And this is, of course, inspired by the great work of V. And I think that as we come together, new ideas will be filtering through the collective. And I have a guest here with me, and I think that all of us will be entering into connection in new ways. This is part of Pluto in Aquarius. I hope that you will come and join me. These are not the only things going on next year, but they're the real power shifts. And one of the things that I've been talking about is how, as we move forward, the old energy also moves back, pulls us back into archaic or older forms, so that we have to, in some ways, redouble our attention and our awareness and consciousness and willingness to be there, to be open to the changes that are calling us forward. Um, I hope that's helpful, Jim.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. Just
Mm,
understanding these larger contexts
mm,
is so helpful as we navigate all the particulars. So I want to
yeah,
encourage everyone to sign up for the course. It's only a couple hours long, so it won't take a lot of your time, but it'll give you an overview of the planetary movements throughout 2023 that will enable us more deeply to understand the archetypal energies that are swirling around us in the invisible realm as we go day by day through our lives. So thank you so much, Lynn.
yeah,
See
you're
you next
welcome,
Saturday.
Jim.
Bye-bye.
Yes, I'll see you on the 21st, right?
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to now turn to the meta theme of apology. I want to remember yesterday and the womb that was created by those beautiful women as a container for all of us as we explore the depth of what it is that we need to encounter in ourselves and each other as we transform ourselves to be capable of fashioning the kind of world all of us yearn for and all of our children so desperately deserve. We wanted to begin our exploration with indigenous wisdom. And we want to turn today, and we will be spending time over the next 10 days, actually, with various elders from different traditions from around the world, many of whom have suffered very deeply at the hands of colonialism and Western and industrial suppression, and all of them having, through their lives and through what they've suffered and what they've experienced, developed a wisdom that is essential for us to understand as we consider how we ourselves should act and what we need to intend in this very fragile, interconnected world. We're going to be having two speakers today, Alarian McCullough, Ania Tabira, and we will start with Alarian McCullough, who is an elder in the Aleut tribe in Alaska, there by the Bering Strait, and one of the last people to be fully raised and taught in that indigenous wisdom tradition. He's written a number of books on Aleut wisdom. He's been deeply engaged in Native American politics in Alaska, also very deeply engaged in the larger issue of climate change and ecology from a Native American perspective. So, Alarian, I want to thank you for coming. I want to welcome you, and Alarian is going to give us an opening blessing and then take 15 or 20 minutes just to tell a little bit about the Aleut, something about his opening experiences in life as he's navigated in a very, very successful way many of the currents that indigenous people are subjected to. And then we're going to be turning to Iya, and she will tell her story from a very different tradition. And then we will have a dialogue between them as we conclude the session. But Alarian, welcome, thank you, and I really appreciate you appearing on Humanity Rising on this, our second day.
Thank you, Jim. Ang Wan, Kalamechamnat Kalam Kasuda, Tigunangan Way, Unanganasokta Kuya. I said, hello, my other self, Ang Wan, which is the way our people greet each other every day. And I said, the morning tastes good. And that my traditional name is Kuya, which means like an arm extending out from the body, a carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, a messenger. I was given that name at 4 years old by the last Kuya that was left alive amongst my people, and we lived in the Bering Sea. So we will say it's our tradition, as is most of the indigenous cultures, to say a prayer before we begin. So if you would just take a deep breath and don't breathe from the top of your torso, breathe from your stomach area, because if you're breathing shallow, you know you're not present in the moment. And ground yourself. Oh, Tamaligalasada, Ti Tunisada, Usawana ni Tunisada, Kano Kani Tunisada. Grandfather, Great Spirit, Spirit that lives in all things, one of many names. We thank you for this day. We thank you for our lives. We thank you for our loved ones. We thank you for everything in existence, which is born of your love and the teaching that we receive from Mother Earth. Like the eagle, it teaches us that we too can soar high and see far. Like the salmon that teaches us that we too can come home to you. Like the owl, it teaches us that we too can see in the dark. Like the trees, it teaches us that we need to be rooted in order to grow tall and be strong. These and many, many teachings that are there for us if we have the ears to learn, to listen. Thank you for this day, and thank you for all the participants in this conference. Aho, Kahalako.
Thank you, Larry. And now just tell us your story, say something about the Aleuts, and we want to just hear how you've navigated through the colonial industrial overlay that has been present in North America for hundreds of years, and yet somehow you were able to be trained in that deep tradition, untainted by the Western mind, and yet have lived in Western industrial culture. So tell us a little bit more about that background and your story as we begin our session today.
Okay. Yep, my people, we call ourselves Unungan, not Aleut, because that was the name given to us by our former oppressors, the Russians. So we say Unungan, which means the people by the sea. And we flourished in the Bering Sea. We've been there for over 10,000 years and we're still there. We flourished to the point of having the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in all of North America for our time. It's quite an accomplishment, and we in a place that's hard to eke out a living. And we have stories about how our people came out of Egypt, went to out of Mongolia, to Siberia, to Kamchatka, and across by traditional craft, not by the Bering Land Bridge, as most people would say. And we were a people that understood their way and their place in the world, like most indigenous people understand what I mean by their place in the world. We flourished and accomplished many, many incredible things. Like, for example, we never planned what we're going to do the next day. We never planned how we're going to get our food. We didn't have food storage technologies, except for air drying. And we had even a basic form of brain surgery for our time. And we were people who could sit out in the snow and melt it. This is like the Tibetans, you know, we adjust ourselves to where we're at. And we were accomplished, we were able to develop kayaks, one-hold and two-hold kayaks. And with those kayaks, we have stories about going all the way down to the very end of South America. This is something that, again, most people don't know. And we come from a place and from people that said that words are superfluous and may even be dangerous. And we have quite a history with colonialism. The Russians first came, the Russian fur traders came to the Bering Sea in 1741. And our people were the first people they came into contact with. And within 50 years of that conquest, the Russians came and conquered us, where 80% of our people were wiped out in 50 years. So we had our own Holocaust. And the survivors were, there were about 2,000 left at that time. The best hunters and their families were forcibly taken from the Aleutian chain to the Pribilof Island in the middle of the Bering Sea. That's where I was born, was called St. Paul Island, again named after a Russian saint. We call it Tanakh Amich, which means land of mother's brother. And in Tanakh Amich, we continue to survive in the harshest of conditions. We suffered through genocide, starvation, disease, and under the Russian rule, we could not speak our own language, et cetera, et cetera. You know, many of these stories of indigenous people are very similar. And so we had that kind of thing. And the Russians turned over jurisdiction of Alaska to the US in 1867 through the Treaty of Sessions, where the reason that they had the Treaty of Sessions because of the Pribilof Islands, because the Russians took us from the Aleutians to the Pribilofs because of the fur seals, the northern fur seals. They were taking the pelts and selling it to China. And it was very lucrative. At that time, when they first got there, there were like 4 million northern fur seals on these tiny islands. And it's also known to be a mecca for bird watchers, because we have even today 2.5 million seabirds. At that time, there must have been about 3 million seabirds. But and so we were taken to that island and left there each year to fend for ourselves. And each summer they would kill the fur seals. They would use our people to kill these fur seals. They would kill hundreds of thousands of seals every year in a 3-month period. And then the Treaty of Cessions happened and jurisdiction passed on to the US, and our condition did not change. We were maintained as wards of the federal government, and the government did not want anyone to know about what the government was doing there. So they kept people from going to the island without government's permission. The people there could not communicate with anyone on the outside. That was prevented. And the people were not paid. They lived off of whatever the government provided. And so that continued on from 1867 until 1966. This is, again, something that people don't know about, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And of course, disease and malnutrition continued on. The average male lived to be 35 years old. And if you're older than that, you were considered very old. And then in the 1940s, in 1942, the US government decided to take us from the Pribilof Islands to Funter Bay in Alaska as a captive labor force. And they were taken because the Aleutian chain was being invaded by the Japanese. And so they were forcibly taken. They were given 1 hour notice and told to take one bag of whatever they wanted and then go to the Funter Bay, which is in southeast Alaska. And even in that trip itself, many people died because they were put in hold and not allowed to come out for fresh air. And when they got to Funter Bay, it was an abandoned cannery, long abandoned when they took our people there, and they had 2 toilets. And for a population at that time, our people were about 386 people. For 386 people, have 2 toilets, and there was no running water, there was no heat, and the government didn't provide any food. What they did was just gave us 2 cardboard boxes full of dried bread. And that was it. And they thought that since we're indigenous, we can figure out how to live off the land. But our people didn't know how to live in a land that was so foreign. It has trees, it has mountains, and where I come from, we don't have any trees or mountains. They're very flat islands. And during that time, we lost 10% of our population due to starvation or malnutrition and disease. And they had all kinds of diseases like impetigo, measles, mumps, all these kinds of illnesses that they had there. And the government agent or the government doctor there, they had no medical care, no medical provisions for this population of people. And he wrote a letter at one point in time, protesting the treatment of our people. And then he left because he couldn't stand the suffering that our people were going through. And my grandmother died in Funter Bay. And so we have that history behind us. And then, when we were repatriated back to the islands in 1945, the people found the homes were ransacked. It was occupied by the military. The homes and all the valuables were taken, even out of the church. And you can only imagine how it must be to be taken to a foreign country and then brought back. What was a foreign country to our people, and then brought back to the islands to find out that the homes were wrecked. But regardless of that, they continued on. And then and throughout this time, there were some efforts by, like, for example, Frederica Martin, who was a nurse on the island at that time and fought to have our conditions changed. And she was labeled a communist by the US government. And so she had to leave the US. And so that's one of the history. And when I grew up, I would see my dad. He was a clubber who would club seals to kill them. The government had maintained this system of taking seal because of an international treaty where 15% of the fur seal pelts were given to each country: Japan, Canada, Russia, and the US. And so they maintained this treaty, but didn't tell the world how they were treating our people or what was happening there. My dad was a clubber. He killed seal. There were only 5 clubbers to kill hundreds of thousands of seals in 3 months. And of course, behind the clubbers were what we call the stunners, the rippers, all of these people who would take the killed seal and take the pelts and put them away. And it was brutalizing. Our people feel like, everything in creation is there by a whole we call the maker, and that they are to be revered. And so that's the way I was raised, but to kill these seals in such a brutal way, the men, they had to work 17-hour days for 6 days a week. They would get 1 day off. And it was quite hard on my dad. I could see that, and I would watch how the men were treated. One time I overheard this government foreman from the outside who was telling the people what to do. You Aleuts, you so stupid and dumb, it takes 5 of you to dig a ditch, and that kind of thing. I mean, I heard him say this. And then any protest was dealt with very harshly. The government controlled everything. They even gave us the clothing that we wore when I was a child. I'm probably the only U.S. citizen alive that amongst and all my people who were born and raised as slaves. And so I was born and raised a slave, and we had to obey the government with everything. So they provided the clothing, the housing, the heat, the support of the basic infrastructure on the island in order to maintain this industry. And protest was dealt with very harshly. I remember a man who got so pissed off in the 1950s, got so pissed off that he trashed the government agent's office. And the government agent knew that he had to make an example out of him, otherwise he would have, an insurrection. And so this man had a wife and 5 kids. And all his family were put in each individual in different homes so that they would not talk to each other. And he was banished from the village to go to the end of the island without any provisions. And the government agent thought he would die, and that would be a good example. But local people smuggled stuff out to him, so he survived for months. And then when he was repatriated back to the village, I remember this so vividly. He was told that he would never have his family back again. They would all live in individual homes, and they were not allowed to speak with each other. And from that day forward, for the rest of his life, he drank himself into a drunken stupor. And the men, of course, if you violated government rules, you would get less rations for your family, food rations, or you would get diminished amount of coal for heat. And if you violated any government rules, you were put in jail. You suffered these decrease in rations for the whole family, not just yourself. And the worst case is they were deported off the island without your family. And so you can imagine what that was like. And the only reason that we achieved our political independence, the government did not allow anyone to go to the island, and people still were. Each letter that was sent outside was censored by the government agent, and the men suffering under these kinds of circumstances took to drinking what we call piva, homemade brew, every weekend where they had the day off. And they would drink themselves into oblivion. And the women followed the wives of the men that were doing these things had to either drink or suffer through their husbands drinking. And so they drank too. And I think it was like 90% that when I was a child, 90% of the people were alcoholic. And it wasn't a safe place to be. But in contrast to that, I had a very traditional upbringing. And my people still had those traditions that they carried on. And so I was affirmed by every adult every day of my life from age 5 to age 13. To know my grandfather and for my grandfather to get to know me, I had to live with him 24/7 for 2 years, starting at age 4. It was quite a beautiful upbringing. And I was never scolded and ever by anybody. I was always affirmed, every adult would affirm me. Good boy. That's the way I would be greeted every day when I encountered any adult. I would be welcomed into everybody's home, day or night, like a long lost son. Come in, sit down, eat. And that's the way I was treated. And I was given a freedom that very few children today would experience. this freedom included my training or education or whatever you would call it, where I was allowed to watch, listen, and learn. The adult's job was to create the space for a child to learn, not tell them what to learn, how to learn, or to define anything. There were no dictates from an adult as to what I would know. I was just expected to watch, listen, and learn, so I did. And the elders were quite unbelievable. They didn't have any. They said they didn't show any anger, rage, or self-pity or anything like that in word or deed ever. And that's what I took when I saw that. This is why I'm able to work with people from all over the world now, because the elders would say, if you have anger or hatred or rage towards anyone, you not only hurt yourself, you hurt your own people. And this was a very ingrained thing that it turned out to be absolutely true when I was later on, I learned that. But anyway, that's the Unanga story. We gained our political independence in 1966, where we were finally being paid by the US government as civil servants, and we got the houses that we lived in, and we got the land that we lived on, and this was only after some local men were wanting to plan how to change our situation. So in the 1950s, they were all secretly planning, and the government didn't allow us to congregate at all. And so the men went to the government agent and said, hey, we'd like to put on a play for you. And so the government agent thought, this is a cool idea, let's do that. So the men got together, and instead of planning their play, they planned how to achieve our political independence. And so in 1960, the men wrote letters explaining what was happening to us and smuggled it off the island. And it was smuggled and given to the only native newspaper in Alaska at that time, the Tundra Times. And the native newspaper published these letters. And that was picked up by the Human Rights Commission. And the Human Rights Commission was run by a Black man called Willard Bowman. And he wanted to investigate this stuff, and he did that and found the allegations to be true, that we were slaves. And he then turned the report into Congress. And in 1965, the Congress then decides to write a bill to give us our freedom. And that was when we were riding the tide of the Black movement at that time. And we achieved, through congressional action in 1966, we received our freedom. And then the last piece is that in 1983, the government finally pulled out of the island. The thing was, when they pulled out, they didn't give us any safety net. We weren't consulted. And at that time, it took like $3.5 million a year to run both to St. Paul and St. George, two islands out there that are populated. And no one would help. We would get hate mail from all over the world saying, you know, brutal, dirty, bloodthirsty killers of animals. They blamed us for what the government imposed. And it was only through our efforts, through an attorney, his name was Tony Smith, who took our claim to the US government and said, hey, these people you have to settle with these people. And so we got $20 million to split between St. George and St. Paul to build our own economy. And the economy that we built, I mean, we were literally planning one-way tickets for people off the island at that time in 1982. Because the government, you know, was going to pull out. And when they finally pulled out, they left us with nothing. We had to come up with millions of dollars. And that's what Tony Smith, our lawyer, was able to secure, that bought us the time to transition from a government-run company town to private enterprise overnight. We went from 0 per capita income in 1983 to $34,000 per capita in 4 years later. I don't think there's any state or city in the US that has accomplished that. But that's a testament to the heart of our people.
Valerian, this is a stunning story. And, you know, the question I would be asking everyone is, you know, what does apology even mean in the face of what Valerian just told us? And for me as an American citizen, you know, I feel, you know, I want to apologize on behalf of those who either don't know or don't care for what's happened, Valerian. But, you know, to reduce a people into slavery and then walk away without even a semblance of compassion or care is a level of evil, I would say, that we need to recognize and deeply, deeply grapple with. So I just want to honor you, my friend, and the fact that you as a young boy, even with everything going on, they were still able to treat a young boy in such a reverential, tender, supportive way, so that your heart wasn't broken by the slavery and the oppression. And just to think, everyone, after generations, that they still were able to keep that sanctity of how you raise a child in the midst of alcoholism and abuse and being forced to kill those seals and all of that. It's a remarkable story. And then to be able to go from 0 to 34,000 per capita within 4 years is a remarkable statement of the human spirit and the resilience of your culture. So, Valerian, I want to thank you. What a story! This is really amazing.
Yeah,
it's really amazing. Well, listen, we're going to talk more with Valerian in a moment, but I want to invite Iya Tahira, who's coming in from the Virgin Islands. Iya, if you can turn on your video. I don't see, there she is. Can you start your video, Iya? There she is. There she is. Thank you so much, Iya. She comes from a different part of the world, the Virgin Islands. She has a very different tradition, but Ia, like Alarian just did, would love to have you just tell your story in whatever way you would like. And then after that, you and Alarian and I will have a dialogue about various matters that come out of your narrative. But welcome to Humanity Rising. Tell us more about yourself. Oh, we can't hear you for some reason. You're not on mute. No, you turn your mute off. There we go. No, we can't hear you. Not sure what to do here. Maybe is your volume not up? No, you're back on mute now. Let me see what I can do here. No, you're all my indicators are that you're live and you're good to go, but there's some connection, there's some malfunction with your audio.
Yeah, I can see it.
There we go. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Welcome, Ia. Thank you so much for joining us from the Virgin Islands. And just like Alarian just did, just tell us the story of your people, your own personal story for 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll have a dialogue on the other side.
Well, I am Ia Tahira. I'm born Riverly Adams. I was born in the Pocahontas, Mississippi. My father named me Riverly. For the longest, I never understood why my name was Riverly. I was the only child in the community named Riverly. As I grew up in this place, I didn't even know that I would meet myself in a different world of racism and separation. There was a village. I didn't even know it was a village, and I came to know it as a village as I left home. Because Waiakau, we were sharecroppers. But it was a place that I had great-grandmothers. I had a community of protection. And it amazed me even today how this community was able to wrap itself around me, around us as children, and to protect us from such harsh racism that exists in America. So I can only tell my story one piece, because in this diaspora, there are many pieces to be told about the enslaved African ancestors, because they planted throughout the US of America. And there was many, many ways to seduce or reduce them to a most inhumane existence, probably that America would witness, or could witness. And I say inhumane, because when you strip a people of their language, of their very essence, to be connected to their sole existence on the earth, to me, that is the most inhumane treatment of a people. But somehow these people that I grew up with remembered something, had a retention for something, because my great-grandmother, Sarah, I give her credit for keeping something alive. She would tell us stories about old Africa that I would not even know until I left home, because there was no books, there was nothing written that we could go to affirm that we came from Africa, a great African people. That was nothing. So this whole theme, go fetch it, became part of my journey on this earth. I learned that the name that my father gave me was a name that would lead me back to the source that gave me the name that I carry now, Iya Omitoki. An initiated priestess in the Yoruba, which is Yoruba people's religion, a religion of West Africa, Ifa. And I would learn that that name that my father gave me also was a guiding spirit that would take me home, because the word river means she who finds her way back to the source. I came to know that. So I feel grateful to be here in these islands, because when I look at these islands, this is where the disbursement of the enslaved Africans took place, in these islands, in the Virgin and Atlantic Ocean. And so I feel that my ancestors placed me at this pivotal point in this time to be that voice that could sort of glean in a way that we can come home again to who we are, our soul energy, to come home and make sense out of this atrocity that occurred on these soils that we call America, the Northern Hemisphere. Because I can't help but believe that it's purposeful for us as a humanity, that we are sitting here in this circle at this time to re-glean these stories and to tell these stories and to look inside of our own humanity and ask the greater question: what was it for? What lesson did we learn? So I'm going to say a prayer to take me forward. Iamodo pio e, iamodo fio e, obani toto aro go fiano, ia aro do fiba, ia do ashe. So it be, great mother of our humanity. Bless us today as we gather in this circle to glean and retell our story. Thank you, Mother, Mother of creation, Mother of life force energy on this planet. Thank you for allowing us to be in this circle, to relive and retell our story. In St. Croix, there are many stories. And what I learned since I come into St. Croix, and comfortably can say that we all, especially those of us who live landed in the southern states, most of all of us came from these Caribbean islands. The early Africans, enslaved Africans, to land in the Mississippi came out of the Caribbean islands. For some odd reason, I was invited here by the Spirit. I didn't know at the time I was being invited. I came to visit and celebrate a birthday. And when I got here, one of my elders said, you know, the ancestors been waiting for you. I know they didn't come to see me. So what I did, I went out and I got all the things I thought you might need to honor them. So every place that you live here in St. Croix is a plantation where the cane fields, sugar cane fields. So I came to visit and I landed in one of the plantation, Fleming Circle. And immediately those spirits that we call ancestor spirits sought me out. And so what I did, I went out and I greeted them. And it was as if I could feel their presence in that circle where they had lived in these enslaved shacks. And I started to do ceremonial work, which is what I do, is ceremonial work on the planet, to call us back to that place of remembrance. So I set out and did some work in ceremonial and sat there for 10 days. I did the work while I was here. And it wouldn't leave me alone. So I went back to, at that time, I had gone back to Mississippi to visit with my mother, who was at that point suffering a heart disorder. And so I stayed there and I went back, and my intention was to leave there on another journey to go to South Africa. But I kept getting, it was not South Africa that I was going. I was coming to St. Croix. So I came back to St. Croix and I slept on the grounds here in St. Croix 2 nights up in the rainforest to say, okay, if you want me here, you're gonna have to give me another message. Or give me some signals that you want me here. So I came back down and I put a tree in front of, a little tree in front of a house. I say, if you want me here, this is where I will come and live. And so I did come to live in that house, and that was in 2000. But I came to live in that house in 2004. And I have been here on this island ever since then. And I've done initiatory work and ceremonial work since I've been here. And been called to rise to this occasion to help ceremonially return us back to some sense of connection to our original indigenous knowingness. Because there is an indigenous knowingness in all of us. And somehow we have forgotten that indigenous knowingness. And so that has been my journey, is to return, because the elders tell me, until we can go back and fetch it, until we can return to the source from which we come, we cannot know where we're going in the world. So I've been fortunate enough to go to Ghana, to the Akan people's shrines, and gather that information. I've been fortunate enough to go to Egypt and gather that information. And I've been fortunate enough to meet this wonderful storyteller that came before me, who helps me to connect, even without him knowing it. He helps me to connect those dots, to know that we are all one people. We are all weaving this hoop back together to really know, and to know what it is that we came to this earth to do and be. And when we speak of the atrocity that was done to the people, the indigenous people, African people, Native American people, we have to ask a bigger question. What had it taught us as a human species? What had it taught us? Not just what has it taught us about the victimizers, but what has it taught us as those of us who became victims of the victimizers? What has it taught us? Do we just apologize to those who enslaved us? Or do we apologize to ourselves in some way for being enslaved or coming under that auspice to be enslaved people? What was the greater lesson for our humanity that we bring back here? What is being asked in this holy holiness of gathering. That it feels to me that that's what it is, that now there's a knocking on this door that's saying, that's bringing us here, bringing us all together to answer that question. Do I forgive myself? Are we all in need of what my great teacher, Maladoma said, or Somain would say, are we all in need of a great baptism right now? To remember who we are and why we are here as a human species. And it seemed to me that that's what we forgot. We start to categorize and put ourselves in these pieces, black, white, red. Are we not all one human species? It seemed to me that everything on the planet knows that it belongs to a species, except us. We seem to separate in these small little particles as black and white, as opposed to the rainbow of who we truly are as a species, and ask the question, what part of that do I bring to create a greater humanity on this planet? And it feels to me that we are right here at this threshold to ask that question and to gleam into that question and answer that question for ourselves. What have I learned to separate from my other self across these lines? What was the lesson? What was that guided me, made me vulnerable? Or was there a choice? And an echo, as I asked, another elder echoes to my voice and said, child, if we had not been pushed out the nest, would we have chosen to go out on our own? That's what one of my wise elders asked me. Instead of blaming, could we ask that question, she says to me, would we have chosen as a species to evolve and go out on our own? Or would we have stayed comfortably fighting within our small pack against each other, attached to a world that we had created and believed that that was all that we came to be? Would we have gone out to evolve into this greater part of ourselves as a species? Would we? Did it take all of this to bring us to this brink of almost extinction again? But how many times have we extended ourselves as a human species on this earth? Is this not our greatest moment to ask this question? Why do we come? What will we do in this evolving world today? Because it will evolve with or without us. Because we know that Mother Earth, she takes care of all of us indiscriminately. She doesn't take from us, she takes care of us all indiscriminately. And when we are disobedient on her, guess what she does? She throws us right off and start all over again. So what is the greatest question that we can ask? What gift do I bring for this time? And how will I serve? How can I help? How can I bring my greatest offering? What would that look like? To bring my greatest offering today. I can tell my story. There are many pieces of this story. Many pieces of this story. All of us could tell a part of our experience, our existence in it. but I can only own my peace. I can only own my peace and the gift that I might bring to this sacred moment in history, to rewrite a different story for ourselves. I think that's why we're here, to rewrite a different story. I told a group not long ago, I don't want to go down that path of telling how horrific the story is of what happened to Black folks. I could tell that story over and over again. For me, what it meant. And then you can hear other voices. Have we not heard that story enough? The first time I felt it was, I didn't know I was a nigger until I left my village. I didn't know what it was. And when I went and asked my great grandmother, she said, hate for hate, don't get nothing for hate. Obviously, them dead boys don't know how to love themselves. So how do you take that thread and put it in, make some sense as a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old? Because she didn't give me anything but that thread. But what it came to mean to me is that I cannot hate the other self. I cannot hate that other self out there. That there's something greater that you have to glean from what's happening out there, my daughter. Because look here, she said, you come from great African people. That's a thread she gave me to walk with. So I had to go out and do what the other elders said, go back and fetch it. Return to the source and know why you came and know what you bring. Know why you came. Glean into the experience and draw from it the wisdom that you have learned along this path. And now recreate again, my daughter. Unlike Valerian, I am really so grateful that he can hold on to that piece, because I know our kinship. I know we came from the same source. And I know that his elders allowed that to live, not just for him, but for all of us, that he could come back and help weave us back to this hoop. What part will you bring? And what I like to leave us with is a prayer of forgiveness. Oh, ancestors, forgive us for we forgot our original order. Oh, ancestors, forgive us for we forgot the original agreement that we individually made to be here now. Forgive us. Oh, ancestors, forgive all of us, for we forgot. Let us rise in this time to reconcile our differences and become the greatest yet to be born. And so it be, I share. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's, it's hard to know what to even say after Iya and Alarian. It's just hard to even know how to take in the immensity of what we've inflicted on one another. And in the midst of that, the extraordinary capacity that these two precious human beings have demonstrated that whatever you come from, you can return to the deeper wisdom that will empower you to be who you are. So I want to just acknowledge both of you in the deepest way that I possibly can. And I'm a little overwhelmed emotionally right now because your stories carry such deep power. And your metaphor, Ia, of, the great baptism, that's what we need, is a great baptism of the soul. I'll just circle back to you for a moment, Ilarion, and, just to hear from you any comment you want to make on what Ia just said, and any further wisdom you'd like to provide. And then Ia, would love to just have you comment as well so that we can engage in a small dialogue here. But Ilarion, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you, Jim. Yeah, well, we created an organization called the Wisdom Weavers of the World, which is composed of elders from throughout the world. And Ia is one of our members, and so precious. I love listening to Ia. Yes, it's obviously a very kindred spirit. And what Ia says about what we need to do is so true. I think about how we have been ingrained with this mindset of conquer, conquest, one-upmanship, manage, control, all of these kind of things that began thousands of years ago. I call it the great masculine imbalance, and that there had been swinging from masculine imbalance to feminine imbalance, back to masculine imbalance, blah, blah, blah. The last one was the masculine imbalance, which we are still in. And this masculine imbalance believes in control, manage, and fear, in my feeling. And this is what we are ingrained in to do. For example, there's probably no one in the world that doesn't want to plan for how they're going to survive. My people, they've given me a legacy of don't worry about that. We don't have to plan. We just have to be present in the moment and in the heart. The rest will be taken care of. And I know this to be true because I have lived that. And planning is based on fear. And, we're worried about how we're going to get food the next day. We're worried about how we're going to have money to support the family, et cetera, et cetera. That's based on fear. And what our people say, and what all indigenous people say, is that all we need to do is be present in the moment and in the heart. Traditionally, the heart used to tell the mind what to do. Now the mind tells the heart what to do. And it's reversed from the way it was. And part of going back to what Ia talks about who we really are, we are people who were simply present in the moment and in the heart. And we know that our hearts, individually and collectively, contain a gift that you have to give to the world. Each person is special. Each person is sacred. And that we have a gift to give to the world if we have the courage to go to your heart. And it takes courage, real courage, to do this. You have to go through, for example, all the things that have traumatized you since you were a child. Who wants to do that? But when you process it, you let it go. that's part of what is needed, is this full circle of completion. And it begins, as the elders say, with yourself. Nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. So we trash on the outside because we're trashing ourselves inside first. We are criticizing others because we criticize ourselves. We judge others because we judge ourselves. All of these things are beginning with ourselves. And so the elders say, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's so true, that the most unselfish thing that we can do as individual human beings is to heal ourselves. That is the first priority. Then you forgive yourself. That's all part of the healing. But we don't forget the past, but we don't focus on it. The elders say, when we choose to focus, we're energy beings, mentally, physically, and spiritually. When we choose to focus on stopping something, whatever it is, we're energy beings, and we're putting mental, physical, and spiritual energy into the stopping. And what we try to stop gets bigger. That's why every era is repeating the same things over and over again, and maybe even bigger. And that they said that what we must do is focus on that which you want to see in the world without reaction to anything. And that takes courage too. And this is why, I feel that elders all over the world who lived this life and who have a legacy of their people have a lot to offer today, especially now when we're coming to the edge of human survivability. We really are. We have very few years left. And the best, we're all doing this because we still have this optimism in my other self, on my other self, that we can do this. And all we have to do is remember who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilarion. Very powerful. Ia, want to make a comment?
I don't know if I could say more than what Valerian said, but one of the things I will say, especially towards the male sentiment, male energy right now rising, there's great opportunity to even embody that. And in our culture, in the Black culture, I found that it's most painful and destructive in many ways, because the Black woman was forced to carry a place.
Oh. Looks like you froze, Ia.
Yeah, her internet must have had problems. One thing I'll say about hopefully she gets back on. One thing I'll say is, we have this triangle of victim, perpetrator, and savior, and we all have entered this triangle. And what we have to do is when you think outside the box, you mean get outside of this triangle structure.
Yes.
Which is not doing anyone any good.
Well, Laren, I think a point that you made before is that we want to take reference to the past, but we don't want to dwell on the past. That's so important in any process of liberation. And what I would like to ask you to comment on, because this notion of remembrance, I think remembrance, as I understand it in the wisdom traditions, is remembering past the past into the primordial.
Yeah.
Because that is the bedrock out of which our lives and history emerges. If we get stuck in just the past, we get stuck in our wounds, and that's the victim, victimizer, savior complex. But I think the indigenous wisdom that you carry and E is carrying is allowing us to remember before the past into the primordial. And it was in the primordial that you were raised. I mean, your story of how the elders, in the midst of everything that was going on, could still reverence you as a young child was because they were connected into that primordial consciousness that they were able to embody. And that is what really nurtured and saved your life, so that you weren't raised as a slave. You were raised as a free, autonomous, courageous, heartful young boy. And I just found that a beautiful, beautiful way of expression. And I think that explains so much of who you've become today.
Oh, that is so true, Jim. You know, when you get past the work of living now, well, what we go to is our long past through our souls.
Yeah.
Many people have different ways of describing it, but really it is going to our soul, because our souls carry the information for us individually as to what we've done and what we are here to do. And so, you know, I can't explain what that means to be able to access your soul, but ultimately that's what we're doing. And the soul is a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is. It's our memory in order to inform us enough so that we can move on beyond what that memory has. And ultimately, you know, my mom would say, you know, we cry when a baby is born and laugh when people die. And the reason for it is that before we were born, we were spirit beings, and we are formless and endless. And then we take human form, which is very dense, as we all know in life, and we're going to suffer the trials and tribulations of a human being. But when we die, we are back to our original form. That's a reason to celebrate. I see Tahira is back. Yeah.
I don't see her yet. Tahira, are you back? She may not be able to access it here. There we are. There we are. Can you hear us, Tahira? Yeah, she's still trying to connect.
Yeah.
I'll give it another minute, then I think we'll bring the session to a close. Iya, are you with us? No, I don't think so. So, Ilarian, why don't we close out? Just give us a final blessing. If we get Iya by the end of your blessing, we'll bring her in so she can make a final comment. But what you've offered today, my friend, was extraordinary and profound. And I just want to acknowledge that as we close. And thank you for your recommendation for bringing in Iya. She's such a deep soul. And both of you remember so clearly the primordial. So give us a final blessing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim, for holding this initial gathering on forgiveness and what we need to express ultimately is love. And so I participate in maybe 2 Zoom conferences or gatherings a week for the last 3 years all over the world. And I can tell you that people are changing, as witnessed by the fact that you've got these people who are here in this gathering now. People are changing. They realize that what happens is stuff. The way we used to deal with the trials and tribulations of human beings in the past doesn't work anymore. Business as usual will not work. We have to change, and everyone in your audience, as well as everyone else in the world, have this gift to give to the world, and we need to access it for the most unselfish thing to do to benefit the world. And that we are called to do this now, not tomorrow, but now. And so with that, Ia, are you there?
No, I think she's still out.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, we can't quite make you out. Sorry.
okay, well, I guess, Jim, we can say the closing prayer now.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Of all, Grandfather, Great Spirit, Spirit lives in all things. Thank you for this gathering. Thank you for the teaching that we received from the original instructions. And thank you for letting us know that we have people around who still remember what we need to do to follow your instructions. And we thank you for everyone in the world. We thank you for all of our blessings. Masicho, Apela Colorado.
Thank you, Ilarion. Thank you, Ia. Thank you, everyone. This pathway into the depths of apology and forgiveness and reconciliation healing is a deep one, as we've seen yesterday and today. We'll continue on this pathway. We'll continue to illuminate all that we need to forgive and all that we need to become. And the message of Ilarion and Ia is that in the end, it's all about a deep remembering. And I want to just thank our elders for enabling us to do that today. That'll bring our session to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. And we'll see you again tomorrow for 2 more elders that, like Ilarion and Ia, will tell their stories and comment on what apology and forgiveness means in our time. Thanks again, Ilarion. Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.